banned from my own sister's wedding after spending $15,000 to make it perfect. I thought I was helping her build her dream day, but behind the scenes, my mother was rewriting the story. Message by message, turning my sister against me. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a full-blown campaign of manipulation. What didn't they count on? I kept the receipts and I was done staying silent. My name is Lisa Grant, and I never thought the word family would one day feel like a betrayal wrapped in expensive paper. I'm 36 years old, a senior event planner at a luxury firm in downtown Chicago. My days are a flurry of flowers, contracts, champagne tastings, and ensuring other people's milestones unfold perfectly. But even with a profession defined by celebration, I could never have predicted how quickly my world would unravel, all because of a wedding I helped build from the ground up. My sister's wedding. Rebecca, my younger sister by 4 years, had always been the dreamy one. Soft-voiced romantic, a middle school teacher who believed in soulmates and love stories that echoed in poetry. Our bond wasn't just familial, it was deep, woven into every part of our childhood and adulthood. So, when she got engaged to James, a level-headed architect, I was genuinely thrilled. I offered to help not as a planner, but as her sister. I handled the details she felt too overwhelmed to consider. Researching vendors, coordinating RSVPs, helping with fittings, and offering financial support when her budget began to strain. Mom, however, Deborah Grant, had her vision. From the moment Rebecca slipped that ring on her finger, Mom declared this wedding would be the social event of the season. She claimed it was her turn to shine as the mother of the bride, and slowly but surely, she edged me out of key decisions. At first, I chalked it up to excitement. She's always been intense, always preferred control. But what I didn't see, until much later, was that her intentions went beyond enthusiasm, they were calculated. Over time, I began to notice changes. Rebecca stopped sharing updates with me. I'd hear about bridal showers from mutual friends after they'd already happened. The bridesmaid group chat I created was replaced by another one I wasn't invited to. When I confronted Rebecca gently, she seemed flustered. Mom said, "You were so busy with work lately." I didn't want to add more stress. I tried not to take it personally. The real shift came 2 months before the wedding. It was a Sunday afternoon when I received a formal-looking email with the subject, "Important update regarding wedding rolls." At first, I assumed it was a schedule change. But as I read the words, a dull chill crept over me. "Dear Lisa, after much reflection and discussion, we've decided to restructure the wedding party to better align with the overall experience we're curating. We deeply appreciate your contributions, but at this time, we will be proceeding without your involvement in the ceremony. We ask that you respect this decision and allow the day to unfold peacefully." There was no call, no explanation, just that I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. My chest tightened with confusion, disbelief, then a rising heat of betrayal. I called Rebecca. No answer. Texted. Nothing. I drove to my parents' house the next evening, needing answers. Mom answered the door with her usual polished smile. "Lisa, we weren't expecting you." "I got the email," I said, stepping inside. The house smelled like roses and catered appetizers. I followed the voices to the living room, where Rebecca sat stiffly on the couch, flanked by our cousin Megan, her new maid of honor, and Mom, who held court like a queen. "Let's sit," Mom said. "We should discuss this maturely." "Why am I being removed from the wedding party?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. Rebecca opened her mouth, but Mom spoke first. "This isn't about blame. It's about what's best for everyone. You've been distant, controlling. Rebecca needs calm energy, not added stress." Controlling, distant. I've been financing parts of this wedding. Helping with vendors. I paid the deposit for the photographer, Mom. "No one asked you to," Mom replied coldly. "I did," Rebecca said weakly, but her voice barely registered. "Megan has offered to step in," Mom continued, as if this were some corporate reorganization. The room closed in. My pulse roared in my ears. "You're letting her replace me?" Rebecca looked away. That hurt more than anything. "We all agreed," Mom said, finality in her tone. "You're not welcome at the wedding." Something inside me broke. I didn't remember leaving. Just the soft sound of Rebecca calling my name as I walked out. No footsteps followed. The drive home was a blur. Streetlights turned to watery smears as tears clouded my vision. I pulled over twice, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. My phone buzzed with texts, but I couldn't bring myself to read them. When I got home, Tyler was waiting. He rushed to me, concern etched on his face. Lisa, what happened? I collapsed into his arms, the whole story spilling out between sobs. The meeting, Mom's coldness, Rebecca's silence, Megan's smug smile. They can't do this, Tyler said, fury rising in his voice. You've done nothing but support her. That doesn't matter, I whispered. Sleep was impossible. At 4 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table, listing every contribution I'd made to the wedding. $2,500 to the photographer. $800 for welcome baskets. $1,200 for a string quartet. $4,200 for first-class honeymoon flights. $3,800 for the private villa. $600 for curated experiences. More than $15,000 erased by dawn. I had made my decision. I opened my banking app. One by one, I canceled everything. Refunded what I could, pulled the honeymoon money back into my account. Moments later, I checked my phone. Missed calls. Messages from Mom. You're overreacting. This isn't about you. From Rebecca. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. From Dad. Can we talk? But it was the voicemail from Mom that sealed it. If you cancel that honeymoon, you'll regret it. You're being selfish again. Just like always. I stared at the phone, my heartbeat steady now. The hurt had shifted into something clearer. Resolve. I was done being manipulated. I called my credit card company. Reported unauthorized charges. Mom had used my card without permission, ordered new linens and more favors in my name. By 7 a.m., I'd untangled myself from Rebecca's wedding entirely. Then, I turned off my phone and walked into the silence I'd spent years avoiding. The hours after I canceled the honeymoon passed in a strange, suspended haze. I sat alone on my couch, the morning sun pouring through the blinds like nothing had changed. But everything had. My laptop still sat open on the coffee table, the travel confirmations now replaced with cancellation receipts. The absence of guilt surprised me. In its place was something else, relief, tinged with a quiet grief I couldn't quite name. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed with yet another incoming call. I didn't even check the screen. I powered it off instead. I needed space to think, to feel, to understand. I hadn't eaten, but food seemed irrelevant. Instead, I took a long walk through the arboretum near my apartment. Blossoms spilled from every branch, perfuming the air with jasmine and magnolia. Life thrived around me in vibrant contrast to the emotional wreckage I carried inside. I sat on a bench beside a small koi pond and let myself cry. Not the quiet, controlled tears I'd allowed the night before. This time, it was full-bodied sorrow, unfiltered and raw. It wasn't just the wedding. It was a lifetime of tiptoeing around my mother's moods, a lifetime of explaining away her dismissiveness, her cutting remarks, her need to control. And now it was all spilling out. When I returned home, I found Tyler still there. He'd cleaned my kitchen, made tea, and left a note on the fridge. Call me if you need me. I'm here. I stared at it for a long time before pressing it to my chest. That night, I began writing everything down. Not just the wedding expenses or the canceled plans, but memories. Incidents I'd buried. The time Mom told me Rebecca's science fair ribbon was more impressive than my debate trophy because at least it required real intelligence. The time she forgot to tell me about a family holiday dinner, claiming it was a last-minute plan until I saw the invites on the fridge weeks later. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I typed, and slowly, a pattern began to emerge, not just in my mother's behavior, but in how I had learned to minimize myself to keep the peace. The following morning, I met Olivia at our favorite bakery. She was already waiting, a cappuccino in front of her and a look of protective fury in her eyes. I didn't even have to say a word. She's sick, Lisa. This is not normal maternal behavior. You know that, right? I do now, I admitted. I told Olivia everything about the financial manipulation, the exclusion, the silence from Dad, and Rebecca's blank stare when Mom declared I wasn't welcome. I told her about the call logs, the fake texts, and the deliberate twisting of events. And what's your plan? Olivia asked. I exhaled. To stop pretending. She nodded slowly. Good, but I think you're going to need more than just clarity. You need backup. Like what? A therapist, a lawyer, maybe. People who understand narcissistic family systems. And maybe even your aunt, Catherine. She's been through this before, hasn't she? That afternoon, I called Catherine. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but she answered immediately, her voice warm and familiar. Oh, Lisa. I've been waiting for this call. You have. Ever since you were a little girl, she said softly. I've seen it. I've watched Deborah mold narratives to suit her needs, isolate people, and make them question their memories. She did it to me, to your father. And now she's doing it to you and Rebecca. I felt tears well up again. You're not crazy, Catherine said. You're not dramatic. You're waking up. We talked for over an hour. She shared stories from her youth, how Mom had driven a wedge between her and Dad, how she'd been painted as unstable to their extended family, how she'd finally walked away when it became too toxic to bear. But I lost time, she warned me. Years of a relationship with my brother, with you. Don't let that happen with Rebecca. I promised I'd try not to. That weekend, I got a message from Dad. A short, careful text. Can we talk? Alone. We met at a park midway between our homes. He looked older than I remembered. More tired, as though holding up the facade of harmony had eroded something inside him. I didn't know she'd gone that far, he said once we sat on a bench. With the texts, the exclusion, I thought it was a misunderstanding. I said nothing. Your mother's not well, he added, eyes scanning the horizon. She never has been, not fully. But I let it go on. Because confronting it felt harder than absorbing the damage. That's not good enough, I said quietly. I know, he nodded. I want to do better? He told me he'd begun attending therapy himself. That Aunt Catherine had convinced him to take a hard look at the choices he'd made or avoided making for decades. If there's a way to fix this, Lisa, he said, I want to try. Then stop enabling her, I said. Stand up for Rebecca. For me, for yourself. He nodded, eyes wet. The next few days brought a silence that felt expectant, like the moment before a storm. I kept my phone on but ignored most calls. Rebecca hadn't tried to reach out. And part of me hoped that meant she was finally starting to question things on her own. Then came the 3:42 a.m. message. The one that cracked everything open. I'm so sorry, Lisa. Mom's been lying to me about you for months. James and I just found out what she did with the honeymoon reservations. Please call me. Please, I need my sister back. I stared at it for a long time. My hand hovered over the screen, heart racing. I didn't respond right away. I needed to understand what she meant, what she knew. I needed to hear it from her lips, not just a text. That conversation would come. But first, I needed to anchor myself. Because once I opened that door again, everything would change. He's parking the car. I wanted a few minutes with just you first. Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she arranged her purse beside her. Lisa, I don't even know where to begin. I waited, giving her space to find her words. This wasn't how I'd pictured our first real conversation after the confrontation, but nothing about this situation had followed expected patterns. I believed her, Rebecca finally said, voice breaking. All these months, Mom has been showing me texts from you, canceling plans, telling me you thought my wedding choices were tacky, that you were too busy with your important career to be bothered with wedding details. Tears spilled onto her cheeks. I believed her because it was easier than thinking our mother would lie so completely, so deliberately. She showed you fake texts? I asked, still struggling to comprehend the extent of the deception. Rebecca nodded and pulled out her phone. James figured it out. Look at this. She scrolled to conversations in her messaging app that were supposedly from me. Except they weren't my words. The messages dismissed wedding plans, complained about costs, and made snide remarks about her choices, all attributed to my number, but the tone and content were foreign to me. Mom had access to my phone. She created a contact with her number but used your name. When I thought I was texting you, I was texting her. Then she'd respond pretending to be you. Rebecca wiped her eyes. And she deleted real messages from you. I never received half the things you sent. The methodical nature of the deception was staggering. But what about when we saw each other in person? Surely you could tell something was off. We barely saw each other these past few months. Mom always had an excuse for why you couldn't make it to wedding events. And when we did meet, she was always there, steering the conversation, interpreting everything you said afterward in the worst possible light. Rebecca looked up as James approached the table. He placed 3 coffees down before taking a seat beside her. Lisa, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what was happening sooner. How did you figure it out? I asked. The honeymoon cancellation was the tipping point, James explained. When Rebecca got the notification, she was confused because she didn't even know about the Bali trip. Your mother claimed you had promised this elaborate honeymoon, then canceled it vindictively after being rightly excluded from the wedding. But that made no sense, Rebecca interjected. Why would you spend thousands on a honeymoon if you were resentful, like Mom claimed? So we started digging, checking phone records, comparing message timestamps, James continued. Once we started looking for inconsistencies, the whole fabrication fell apart. The final proof, he said grimly, came when we found a folder on your mother's tablet. She'd been keeping screenshots of the fake conversations, probably to keep her story straight. I pushed my folder across the table. I brought my evidence bank, transfers, emails, everything. As Rebecca and James flipped through the documents, their expressions shifted from shock to horror to indignation. The contrast between my actions and Mom's narrative couldn't have been clearer. That day at your parents' house, James said, Rebecca thought we were meeting to clear the air. She had no idea your mother was planning to ban you from the wedding. I froze, Rebecca admitted. When Mom started saying those terrible things and claimed we'd all agreed, I was in shock. By the time I processed what was happening, you were already gone. She reached for my hand across the table. Lisa, I never agreed to exclude you. You're my sister, my best friend. I can't get married without you. The validation cracked something inside me. For months, I'd been gaslit into doubting my memories and instincts. Now the truth was finally surfacing. We need to talk about Mom, I said, when I found my voice again. This isn't just meddling. This is calculated manipulation. It gets worse, James said. After you left that night, Rebecca confronted your mother. The things she said, the venom, it was like watching someone transform into a different person. Rebecca nodded. She admitted to everything but showed no remorse. She said she was protecting me from your influence. When I said I wanted you in the wedding, she threatened to withdraw financial support and tell everyone I was having a breakdown. Just like she did with me, I murmured. Exactly, James said. It's a pattern to isolate and discredit anyone who challenges her. We spent the next hour mapping out the extent of Mom's manipulation. The altered texts, diverted invites, whispered rumors, emotional blackmail, and financial control. Each revelation created a fuller picture of a decades-long pattern. I've arranged a meeting, I said at last, with Dad, Aunt Catherine, and other family members who need to hear the truth. A kind of intervention, when Rebecca asked. Tomorrow evening, will you come? Of course, it's time everyone knew. The following evening, we met at Aunt Catherine's house. Rebecca and James came with me, and Dad was already there with Uncle Paul and Grandma Martha, who had requested to attend after a troubling phone call from Mom. I presented everything in order. Without anger, just facts. Rebecca supported every detail. Catherine added her own experiences, describing how Mom had driven wedges between her and Dad early in their marriage. James described Mom's unhinged behavior at their apartment. Dad sat quietly, growing paler with every word. When he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. I knew some of it. Not everything. But enough. I should have done something years ago. I chose peace over protecting you. I'm so sorry, Lisa. Mom arrived late, having been told this was a wedding budget meeting. Her confident entrance faltered when she saw the group and the documents on the table. What is this? She asked, eyes darting. A chance for truth, I replied. What followed was textbook denial, counter-accusations, attempts to win allies. When those didn't work, rage. And finally, crocodile tears and claims of being misunderstood. I will not be treated this way, she declared when no one defended her. After everything I've done for this family. About the wedding, Rebecca interrupted, standing. Lisa will be my maid of honor. If you can't accept that and behave respectfully, you'll have a limited role. Mom looked stunned. You would choose her over your mother. I'm choosing truth over manipulation, Rebecca said. Health over toxicity. She turned to Dad. Your father will never allow this. But Dad stood firm. Deborah, enough. This ends now. The meeting didn't end with hugs and healing, but the truth had been laid bare. The cycle confronted, and for the first time, we were moving in the same direction. The wedding was weeks away, and we still had miles to go, but the foundation of truth, boundaries, and healing was finally in place. The week before Rebecca's wedding arrived with a tentative new normal, establishing itself within our fractured family. After the intervention, Mom had cycled through various tactics: icy silence, tearful pleas for understanding, rage-filled accusations, and finally a grudging, outward acceptance of the new boundaries we'd established. Dad had surprised us all by standing firm in his support of Rebecca's decision to reinstate me as maid of honor. After decades of choosing peace over confrontation, he seemed to have found a reserve of strength none of us knew he possessed. "I should have protected you both long ago," he told me during a private conversation on my apartment balcony, city lights twinkling below us. I convinced myself that saying nothing was the same as keeping the peace. I was wrong. "Why now, Dad?" I asked gently. He stared into his coffee cup for a long moment. Seeing it all laid out like that, the deliberate nature of it, I couldn't hide from it anymore. "And honestly, Lisa, I'm tired. Tired of walking on eggshells, tired of pretending everything is fine when it isn't." His vulnerability was both shocking and healing. This new version of my father, willing to acknowledge hard truths, to apologize, to change, gave me hope that genuine transformation might be possible. Rebecca and I had been rebuilding our relationship day by day, our bond bruised but not broken. We spent long hours talking through the manipulations that had driven us apart, grieving the months of sisterhood we'd lost. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if James hadn't discovered those fake texts," she said during one of our reconciliation brunches. "Restored to their rightful place in our weekly routines." "Let's not think about that," I suggested, squeezing her hand across the table. "We're here now." As for Mom, the family had presented her with clear conditions. She could participate in the wedding, but her role would be significantly restricted. No more unilateral decisions. No private conversations with vendors. No attempts to isolate or manipulate any family members. "And if I refuse these conditions?" she'd asked, the word conditions dripping with disdain. "Then you'll attend as a guest only," Rebecca had stated firmly, with no input on any elements of the ceremony or reception. To everyone's surprise, Mom eventually agreed, though her compliance seemed more strategic than genuine. The flashes of resentment in her eyes, quickly masked by artificial pleasantness, told the true story. My journey through this ordeal had been transformative in unexpected ways. The initial devastation had given way to clarity about family dynamics I'd normalized for too long. Working with a therapist specializing in family trauma, I began to recognize patterns of enabling and people-pleasing in my behavior that had made me vulnerable to manipulation. "Your worth isn't measured by what you provide to others," Dr. Marshall reminded me during a particularly difficult session. "Not financially, not emotionally, not practically." These words became a mantra as wedding preparations entered their final phase. I reinstated my role as maid of honor with a newfound sense of boundaries. Yes, I would help coordinate the bridesmaids and assist Rebecca with last-minute details. No, I would not deplete my savings or sacrifice my well-being to manage everyone else's emotions. I also rebooked a modified version of the honeymoon package for Rebecca and James, still generous, but scaled to reflect my new understanding of healthy giving. "This is a gift freely given with no strings attached," I told them when presenting the revised itinerary. "Not a payment for inclusion or affection." The wedding day itself arrived sunny and clear, a beautiful contrast to the emotional storms of previous months. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. at the Clayton Hotel. Leaving the morning and early afternoon for preparations, Mom maintained her promised behavior, though the effort visibly strained her. Her interactions with me were minimal but outwardly polite. Her attention was focused on playing the role of mother of the bride perfectly for the gathering guests. As I helped Rebecca into her wedding dress, the one I hadn't been present to see her choose, I felt a momentary pain of loss for the uncomplicated joy this day should have held. Rebecca caught my expression in the mirror. "I wish we could erase the last few months," she said softly. "I don't," I surprised myself by responding. As painful as it was, it brought truth into the open. "We can build something healthier now." She turned to face me, radiant in ivory lace. "When did my big sister get so wise?" "Probably around the time my little sister got so brave," I replied, carefully adjusting her veil. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. I stood proudly beside Rebecca, holding her bouquet as she and James exchanged vows full of authentic emotion. Mom sat in the front row beside Dad, her composure perfect, her eyes occasionally meeting mine with unreadable emotion. It was during the reception that the most unexpected moment of healing occurred. As guests mingled during cocktail hour, I found myself momentarily alone near the gift table, adjusting some displaced cards. "The calligraphy is beautiful." Mom's voice came from behind me. "That was your doing, wasn't it?" I turned, braced for criticism disguised as a compliment. But her expression held something I rarely saw directed at me: genuine appreciation. Yes, I answered simply. Rebecca mentioned loving handlettering. Mom nodded, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. Finally, she spoke again, her voice lower, less certain. You've always noticed those details about people, what they love, what matters to them. I never had that gift. The admission, so small, yet so significant, coming from her, left me momentarily speechless. The therapist Catherine recommended, Mom continued, looking anywhere but at me, says I need to practice acknowledging other strengths without feeling diminished by them. A brief, humorless laugh. I have work to do in that area. You're seeing a therapist? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Your father insisted. After everything. She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. I don't expect this to fix things between us. I know that will take time, if it's even possible, but I am trying. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a transformation. But it was a tiny crack in the fortress of denial she'd built around herself. And for today, that was enough. 1 month after the wedding, our family began tentative group therapy sessions. Mom attended reluctantly at first, then with increasing willingness, as the framework gave her acceptable ways to express her needs. Without manipulation, Dad found his voice gradually, speaking truths long suppressed. Rebecca and I strengthened our sisterhood, now built on mutual respect rather than codependent patterns. My healing journey continued independently as well. I established clearer boundaries in all relationships, not just with family. I learned to recognize when my helping veered into unhealthy territory, and most importantly, I began to value myself apart from what I could provide or do for others. Tyler had been my rock throughout the entire ordeal, his steadfast support never wavering. 6 months after Rebecca's wedding, during a weekend hike to our favorite mountain overlook, he proposed. Yes, I said without hesitation, but with one condition. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. Our wedding planning stays between us, small, committee, clear boundaries, no drama. His laughter echoed across the valley below us. Deal. Life continued to evolve in the years that followed. Mom's progress came in fits and starts, some days showing genuine growth, others falling back into old patterns. Dad discovered a newfound confidence that revitalized not just his marriage, but his long-deferred personal interests. Rebecca and James welcomed their first child, making me an aunt to a little girl whose middle name Lisa brought tears to my eyes. And I learned perhaps the most valuable lesson of all, that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. That boundaries aren't barriers to love, but foundations for its healthiest expression. And that standing firm in your worth is not selfish, but essential. The journey from that devastating night when my mother said those cruel words, "We all agreed you're not welcome at the wedding," to where I stand now wasn't direct or easy. It required courage to face painful truths, wisdom to distinguish healthy relationships from toxic ones, and strength to demand the respect I deserved. If you're facing similar family challenges or painful exclusions, remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately lead to healing. Your worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it. And sometimes, when the door to reconciliation seems firmly closed, it's the first step toward opening a healthier one. Thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever had to stand up to family manipulation, or set difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you find the courage to value yourself when others couldn't see your worth? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Your support means everything as we navigate these complicated human experiences together. And always remember, your story matters, too.